Hello, everyone coming in. Welcome to another Insider's Guide episode. We have a special guest here, which we'll introduce later. If you don't already recognize him, which you probably should. In the meantime, while everybody's filing in, we're already live on Zoom. So YouTube. Hello, everybody on YouTube as well. In your respective chats, throw in where you're coming from. How's your skies? But even more important, did you get up this morning to watch the total lunar eclipse? I did. I only get up that early for astronomical events and to travel, so it must have been pretty important for me to be out of bed at 5 a.m. It was cool. It was my first lunar eclipse I ever saw, so I was very happy to see it. Did not get to photograph it though. Yeah, one of my dad says apparently I saw one when I was about 5 years old, but I can't remember, so.
Oh, well, that's
the only one I've seen in my memory. It was really exciting to
Congratulations.
see the moon all red.
Yeah.
right.
It's been years and years since I've seen the moon totally eclipsed. There's been a few partials and then some clouded out events, but this was great.
Mhm. And most of Canada got a good shot. It was also really, and this is kind of a shout out for Rask members, to use our Rascals forums. I woke up to just reading emails of Rask members from across Canada talking about what their view looked like, what their weather was, what they were doing. It really felt like you were a community waking up, even though you were alone on your porch looking at it. So that's a great resource to get on for those types of events that we have, or just in general, if you want to connect with other Rask members. So let me just see how we vote. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick reminder. We have our chat where you can ask questions in Zoom. We also on Zoom, we have the Q&A, which if you have specific questions for our Q&A portion, drop them in there and we'll watch that. For our friends over on YouTube, there also is a YouTube chat. We will be monitoring that for questions, and all the links we provide in the Zoom chats, which we'll say we're throwing links in the chat, will be in the YouTube description box. That is also good for people who are joining us via Zoom that want to go back later and see our links. All of it will always be in our YouTube recording in the description box as we live stream on YouTube simultaneously. And I think we are good to get started. So I will let Chris start off. We have a couple announcements and then we'll introduce our guest.
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. I wanted to bring everybody's attention, since we've just recently been talking about Stellarium, Rask in their ongoing service to the public to give everybody the recommendations for the best tools out there for astronomy, amateur astronomy and stargazing, are offering a webinar, an Introduction to Stellarium webinar. That's going to be held. It's free. It's open to the public. You do need to register, though. I think there's limited spaces available, but it's on Monday, November 28th in the evening. That would be 8 o'clock to 9 p.m. Eastern time, so adjust to your local time zone. Blake Nancaro is going to go through what is Stellarium, how it works, what can it do, and you don't need to have it installed in your own computer. You don't even need to commit to trying it or using it. It's just basically designed to spend some time with the software and bring it to your attention so you know just how powerful and easy and terrific it is as a piece of software. So November 28th, Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll put the link. I think we can put the link in the chat. I can do that if you want. Let's see, copy.
And while Chris is putting the link in the chat, I would just like to say Blake's courses are great, and I have taken the beginner one and I'm excited to take more of them, so definitely check out this intro webinar. If you're looking for something to do the week before, this is a Rask members, so Stellarium, if you're not a Rask member, you can join it. This one that I'm talking about is a Rask member only event. It's a tour of the night sky on our Rask robotic telescope. During the winter months, we're going to start hosting this event monthly as the weather allows, because it's winter. It also means it gets cloudy and rainy. But the trade-off is if we do this in the summer, then half of Canada is going to be staying up till 2 a.m., which I don't think most people would like to. So this event will be, the first one is going to be taking place on Wednesday, November 23rd. I will throw the link in the chat. And if you can't make this one, no worries. we can, there'll be one every single month. And basically, we're going to give you a little tour of how we use our telescope that's located in California. We'll take some pictures, one-off pictures with the telescope, which will be in black and white because we use our CCD camera. And then we'll be doing a run of astrophotography throughout the night. And all that data that we get throughout the night from the beginning pictures and through the night will be sent to all the people who have registered for the webinar. So it's a great thing to do. And I do this for students quite a bit. So that's part of the reason we decided RAS members might be interested in it, and everybody usually has a really good time. So a link for that will be in the chat as well. And without further ado, let's get into our main event. We have Charles Ennis here, our RASC president and Sunshine Coast member. And I was saying I can't make a list of everything he does because it's too much, but yeah, I'm sure you have run into him at one point or another. He is a staple in the RASC community. And today he's going to be talking about the World Asterisms project. I'll let him tell you more about it, but it's an amazing, incredible project, which is why we decided to feature it today. So
all right,
take it away.
Sarah. I'm going to start sharing here. Come on, there we go. And I want to welcome everybody from whatever part of the world they are from or happen to have come from. And I also want to gratefully acknowledge that I live and observe on the unceded lands of the Seychelles First Nations, Imash. So, World Asterisms project started in the June of 2021. It's only 17 months old. It's amazing how much we've gotten done in 17 months. It is a project of the Inclusivity and Diversity Committee, and it's meant to celebrate the cultures of the world, but it's also a reconciliation project based on the two-eyed seeing principles put together by Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall in 2004, which were used by our Halifax Center when they worked with the Mi'kmaq to help them recover their skies. And you can see their videos on the RESC YouTube channel that are related to that. So an asterism is a star or a group of stars that have been identified and named, and that's an example there, which happens to be, this is my friend Danny Sklezeski here from my center, and that's one of his favorites, the coat hanger, Brocchi's cluster, was named after Guillermo Francis Brocchi, who in the 1920s drew a map of it, and it's considered a telescopic asterism, but the truth is the first person who recorded it was Persian astronomer Abdal Rahman al-Sufi in 936. So that's about 700 years before there was a telescope. So I guarantee in the dark sky, you can see this with the naked eye. So how many different sky cultures have we examined so far? 522. How many asterisms? 10,118, including 408 names of the Milky Way. That includes 506 telescopic asterisms. And we recently, as of September of this year, started adding solar system, sun, moon, and planets, because these objects, even though they aren't asterisms, they wander all over the sky, do show up in these storylines and the dreamlines of the cultures all over the world. And so far, we've got 1,465 of those. And this is about the sky mirroring the earth. This is another piece of beautiful art from Joe Glode, who's a Mi'kmaq artist, and it's about perspectives, ancient science, and inspiration. It's about perspectives. What you see depends on where you are. If you're way up north where I am, you see one view of Orion, you see it the other way around if you're in the southern hemisphere. But if you're in the equatorial regions, it looks like this when it comes up, and you see that those three stars in the belt are coming up perpendicular, and those first two perspectives people tend to describe as a person, a hunter, let's say. But in this region, they tend to describe it as a spring trap or a plow. So it depends on how you see the sky. The perspectives are important, and it relates to another thing that I like to use as an example. There are 7,000 world languages, and in your children's lifetime, half will probably disappear. And cultures are the foundations of knowledge. And you may say, well, okay, thank you, and the language is still thank you, isn't it? Yeah, but key concepts and ways of seeing the world will disappear with those languages. And this relates to the difficulty and translating words accurately into other languages. And my favorite example comes from New Zealand here. It's this word, Benawa, which is from the Maori, iwi. And it means land, country, ground, terrain, and placenta. Let that sink in for a minute. Basically, the land that gave me birth, the land that nourishes me. And the Maori were great navigators. They were going across thousands of miles of oceans when my ancestors were afraid to leave the coastline because they thought the world was flat. They also used it to determine when to plant, when to fish, that sort of thing. This is the standard International Astronomical Union Southern Sky, which was created in 1922 without regard to anybody's cultures in the South. That's a Maori sky. Absolutely everything in that sky relates to navigation, everything. Here is an ancient Australian sky from the Kokatha people, and you see Ugaria there, which is the Pleiades, a bunch of young ladies, and their elder sister, Kambuguda, is guarding them with her dingo puppies from Nairino, who is a hunter. And every so often, Betelgeuse there starts glowing brighter because he's about to throw magic at her. And then every so often, Aldebaran starts glowing brighter because she's kicking it back at him. It's an indication that 4,000 years ago, they were aware of variable stars. It was used as a weather prediction system. This is an Inuit sky. And that star right down there is called flickering. And that's Sirius, which will always be very low on the horizon at their latitude. And it's related to seeing. If they see that flickering, they know there's winds coming in 2 days. It was navigation systems. Here's a Hawaiian sky. This is the Boneback Lizard, which is one of their 4 major star lines that they use for navigation. There's the Zenith star for Hawaii, and then you have 2 sight lines that give you the north-south directions. Why 2? Because the constellation could be rising or setting, and you might not see all of it. Hawaiian skies, again, the Kite of Coelho, which in my culture would be known as the Great Square of Pegasus. Coelho was a great ancestor, and every single one of the 4 stars in the corner are also named for ancestors. It's divination systems. This is a chart that is comparing ancient Chinese, Vedic, and classical skies for astrological stuff. They put their deities up here. Here's an ancient Babylonian sky. There's the great one, the god Ea. They didn't have calendars once upon a time to hang on the wall to tell you what time of year it was and whether to plant or whether to fish or hunt. But they did make structures all over the world that were aligned to certain star alignments, planetary alignments to figure these things out and keep track of stuff like that. Some skies are full of asterisms. Chinese skies in various different eras, up to 300, and everything that's down here is up there. I mean, literally everything. It's quite amazing. Korean skies, very similar. But then at the other end of the spectrum, you go up to the northern reaches of North America, to the Dene people, and the entire sky is one asterism, Yadi, the traveler. 18 different constellations, all just parts of this one creature. Now, we're kind of used to the idea of stick figures as constellations because that's generally the way they're depicted when you look at modern star maps. But it isn't just stick figures, especially if you go to the southern hemisphere. For example, a lot of cultures have single star asterisms where every single star is a character in the story. So in several African storylines, for example, the Zan people, you'll have this star, Aldebaran, in the Hyades cluster, which is a great hunter or a sky god. Over here, you've got his wives, and they're saying, you're a hunter, go out there and hunt. And he starts hunting 3 animals, which are found down here. Could be 3 zebras, but there are other animals that could be like tapirs. He fires an arrow which falls short. That's the belt, or the sword rather, of Orion. But he can't retrieve it. He's embarrassed because Betelgeuse is a lion waiting in ambush. It's about dark asterisms. If you're looking out from the northern hemisphere into the Milky Way, you're looking out of our galaxy. If you're down in the southern hemisphere looking at the Milky Way, you're looking in towards the center of it. And you're looking at a whole bunch of dust clouds, and cultures like the ancient Inca, that's what they used as their constellations, dark clouds. There's only 2 stars in these constellations you see here, the right there, that's Alpha and Beta Centauri. Here's one. Let's see if you can answer in the chat. Does anyone recognize this? This is looking into those dust clouds from the southern hemisphere. Can you see what that is? Because this shows up in several parts of the world. It is, if you're in Australia, an emu. If it's in South America, they see a rhea, which is in the same family of birds, of course. And if it's Africa, it's an ostrich. They all see it. You see the head is over there on the left. Now, this happens with all kinds of things. This is NGC 2301, which is an open cluster in the constellation Rhinoceros, which was discovered by William Herschel in 1786. And then in the 1800s, this gentleman up here in the corner, English astronomer Ralph Copeland, called it the golden worm. And what he meant by worm was dragon. Then a few years later, people got around to calling it the Great Bird Cluster. But then, relatively recently, fans of J.K. Rowling came along and they decided that it was Hagrid's dragon, which I think is a particularly good name for this over cluster myself. Now, I want to make a point here. We are not attempting to find any time in history where we can say that this particular culture or other all looked up to the sky and saw exactly the same thing. That has never happened in human history ever. So just put that right out of your head. And you can prove it to yourself by going to Stellarium and looking down at the defaults there, right in the left corner there for Western skies. There's 4 of them, and they're all valid. Ptolemy gave us 48 constellations. They're all up in the northern hemisphere. But if we look at one of them, this is Auriga, but he called it Haniokas, which was the rain holder. And the reason he called it a charioteer is because in his day, and hundreds of years either side of the time that he lived, chariot racing was an absolute fanatic sport. There were teams, there were factions, there were riots, there was huge coliseums built, there was huge amounts of money gambled. And if you go and look at those times and the records from those times, you'll see this constellation was named for every single charioteer, real, imagined, divine, every inventor of a biga or a quadriga, harness, everything. And he knew that. So all you could do is just give it this generic name because everybody in his land had a different name for it. And you see it even today. If you go to some parts of the world, you'll find that in this particular town, they have a particular asterism that's related to a particular story and a particular name. But if you go to the next valley, same stars, different name, or maybe same name, different story, or maybe same story, same name, different stars. It's really, really common, and it goes back to that perspective and where you're seeing things from. What makes things even more confusing is between the 13th and the 19th century, many notable astronomers created constellations like crazy. And a lot of them were made to make their sponsors happy. And their sponsors were royalty, and they wanted the royal family to have their constellation in the sky, so I keep getting money for my astronomical projects. And eventually, they formed the International Astronomical Union because, of course, by doing that, what they were doing is making all of these different astronomical charts, and it was impossible to share astronomical data with one another. And the Astronomical Union decided in 1922, that's it, no more. We're going to have a standard chart. Everyone's got the same chart. That's it. That's the end of it. And in 1922, they came up with the 88 standard constellations that we use to this day. However, they're still involved in naming things. In 2015, they came up with a working name for working group for star names because they hadn't yet standardized star names. And they were starting to look for names of exoplanets that they were discovering. And then in 2019, for their 100th anniversary, they said, you know what? Let's give a unnamed star to every single country in the world and invite them to name it, which then they did. So, you know, suddenly get several hundred names added to the list. So this is going on to this day. So if you want to check out these asterisms, you can download them for free from this link here. I'm sure that it will also be put in the chat by Stephanie. Or you can go to the RESE, go to the search box, World Asterisms Project, enter, it'll take you to the page. And basically what you're going to find there is a handbook that lists all the asterisms by subject, not culture, because we want you to see how these subjects cross cultures. We have a second volume, which is a list, just the list, and it's in an Excel sheet as well, so you can play with it, make up your own list. There is a third book, which is the one that lists all of the cultures and then all of the resources available to find more information on those skies and the contacts, all that sort of stuff. There is a Milky Way list. There is a solar system handbook, which is one of those new features that names of the sun, moon, and planets from all over the world. And there's a list that goes with that too. This is a living project that's constantly evolving and growing as we continue to do research to recover skies. We've now got partnerships with Salish and Blackfoot to help them recover their skies. Others are right there, ethno-astronomers all over the world are contributing to this project. This is what my inbox looks like right now. And here's the thing, since we started this project, I've had several people contact me, RESC members, saying, I was at the eyepiece and I saw these stars and they look like, I think it looks like that. Is that something you're interested in? The answer is yes. Send that in. We want that. And if you got some culture that we haven't got on the list, we want to hear from you about that too. So just to finish up the slides here before we get into a tour of the sky, here are 7 stars. So go into the chat and tell me what you call that. I mean, what did they tell you this was in school? Or maybe what did your parents tell you because they came from a culture that had a different name? Put in the chat. I'd be interested to see how many different cultures we have represented here. I'll just give you a minute to do that. I mean, one of the very first things that happened when we started this project is someone came to me and said, how can you possibly say that you've seen all of these stars? Because it's all the same stars. People all over the world look at this, but they all see different things. So what I'm going to do is show you some of those things. These are all things that people have seen when they look at those 7 stars. It's really quite amazing. It's quite a long list. And this isn't the most popular bunch of stars. We're going to get to that in a moment. So I'm going to stop right there. And what we're going to do, basically, we were talking earlier about stellarium. We're going to use stellarium. It has a function where you can look at many of these cultures, not all of them yet. And we're going to take a tour of the sky, and we're going to pick a piece of the sky which is up there now. If you're in the northern hemisphere where I am, it'll be the area around Orion and Taurus. And we're going to go. Chris is going to pick some cultures. We're going to go through, and I'll take you on a tour of these pieces of sky. I see somebody put Little Dipper in there. Okay, actually, it's the Big Dipper. It's the one you probably heard in school. But yes, there are many, many other names besides.
So I have a question, Charles.
Yeah.
So when you say you're working with an indigenous group to recover their sky, can you describe a little bit about how that works?
Well, this two-eyed seeing approach basically is taking astronomers with their view of the sky and elders with their stories, and we get together and I hear your stories. And if I can use the Mi'kmaq example in the Halifax Center, they were trying to recover their use of the lunar calendar. They had all the pieces. But the trouble with the lunar calendar is it gets out of sync with the solar calendar. And at some point, you have to have some system to put in intercalary days to get it back in sync. And by listening to the stories and hearing a repeated reference to the great white moon in winter, they realized they were talking about supermoon. And they realized if we, at that particular time, take this piece here and put it in there and insert it, what happens? What happens is that was the intercalary dates. They recovered the use of it. So what we're trying to do is, and the way they approached it, we're doing the same thing, is for the astronomers to talk about the stars and for the knowledge keepers to talk about the story. So that's why the handbook tells you all about the stars, the star lines, everything, how to find them. This is the name of the characters. This is the name of the story. But you go to volume 3, that'll take the people that will tell you the story. And in the case of the Mi'kmaq, we actually, the society funded creating the videos for YouTube so they can tell that story about Moon and the 7 hunters which is one of the names for the Big Dipper that you just saw there. Or at least that's part of their constellation. And it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of work. John McDonald has been working with the Inuit people for 19 years, and they have now got to the point where they have decided to take charge of their culture and skies. And so we're now pointing to them as the people who can tell that story. And you have to be careful with this because some of this is initiatory and they won't be sharing all of it. And some of it, for example, to use those northern cultures, you can talk about the stars any time of year, but you can only tell the stories in the winter. So there are all kinds of things you have to keep in mind. We call ourselves caretakers because that was a title that was suggested to us by actually African and Australian First Nations people, because basically we don't own it. We are just caretaking this. We're stewards of this information. But by putting all of this stuff out there for free, we're allowing students and educators and researchers to get into this stuff and share it in their research and further develop what we're doing here. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope it
No, no, that's perfect. That's what I was looking for. So you're saying the spirit of it is that for those of us that do outreach, we should really pull in that resource and try to make people as much aware of it as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Being respectful of when it's appropriate to share a story and when it's appropriate to point them to the storyteller, that sort of thing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, some of these cultures, ancient Egyptian, ancient Babylonian, they aren't here anymore. We can talk about those, obviously. There are many that we can't. I come from, a Celtic culture. I can talk about those, but we're trying to be sensitive to the people whose cultures they are. And really, I can't tell a Maori story because I haven't lived there. To tell it, you have to live it. So we're doing our very best to make sure that people are pointed to the people who can tell the story. I should have mentioned one other thing, and that is some of these cultures, because of the corrosive effects of colonialism, have lost a lot of their culture, including their skies. The Hawaiians are a perfect example. And in 1976, they created the Polynesian Voyaging Society, where they created a full-size voyaging canoe. And they were looking for a navigator to teach them how to use the stars again. They found a Satlolese navigator, Maupiolu. And he said, you know what? Same stars. I can teach you this stuff, no problem. But for names, I mean, my culture, Maori, Anitan, you look at all these different parts of Oceania, they're different Polynesian languages, but you'll find a lot of them, again, looking at that, because our name will be the same as yours. But if you've got one that you don't have a name for, come up with a new name, give it a brand new name. It's your name. And that's part of that new naming process. So part of what we're doing here is allowing these cultures, or basically making them aware that people are still naming things up there. Go ahead and do it. Come up with some new names if you don't have old ones. Rename stuff. It's all good. So
it's like an archaeological dig. As long as you document it, it's there for posterity. Okay, I'll stop monopolizing the discussion.
That's okay. This is great. We also have someone that commented that they learned in Scouts it was Ursa Major, but in their mother tongue it's the Northern Dancer. And they also put the actual.
Oh yes, we're going back to Mesoamerica there. Yes, there are lots and lots of names. I mean, one of the reasons I chose the ones that we are going to look at today in our tour is they are close to the celestial equator, so I know you can see them from both hemispheres. But there are some that are so far north, so far south that there's only a few people that have named them, because only a few people can see them on a regular basis. So,
and before we get into, I'll just mention one of the things that we want to do now that this list is published and talk to Charles about this is starting to create resources for outreach, so you can use this information in an outreach setting. So that's where it gets passed on to me and all the national outreach people and outreach across centers. So we're hoping.
And if you need help with that, give us a shout. We'd be happy to do that.
Will do. And if anyone here ends up using it in some sort of outreach and they find something works really well. Please let us know. We'd love to hear how it's going and how this is, how you're, or even in general, how you're utilizing this project. So we can now jump into our tour of the night sky. As always, if you have any questions, we'll ask them when it makes sense. Go ahead.
Okay. Let's see where Chris takes us first. I gave him a list. So
Okay,
there's
well,
basically the sky according to the IAU right there. And you can see Orion, and you can see Aldebaran, and you can see the Pleiades there.
Yeah, there's the Pleiades.
Yep.
I'll do.
Yep. You take the belt of Orion, you go straight up there through the triangle
going
of
to-
the Hyades cluster, and you find the Pleiades cluster up there, which is close to the moon in this particular shot there. There you go. Just like
Sorry,
that.
I'm just gonna hop in really quickly on a technical question.
Yeah.
Chris, somehow you have projected in your screen share our faces too,
Oh, can I get rid of them? Let's see.
or you might be
You know
able
what?
to
I think we
minimize
can
them.
work with that. It's
We can
gonna-
work with that. I'm just, in case anybody sees double of us.
Let me try stopping.
That's never happened before, so sorry, just making sure everything's running well.
Share screen. Let's try this one more time. Oh, it comes back. I don't. Oh, there we go. Okay, I did it.
Perfect. We'll just wait till it loads and I'll let you go. Sorry.
Okay. I'm gonna take the spotlight off here just to.
I don't know why it's frozen. Yeah, my
Slowly
computer's not
crawling
happy.
along here.
Oh, hang on. Let's see if it's coming back. There we go. Okay. You should be
Okay,
seeing it now. All right. Where would you like to go?
you know what? Well, give me the indigenous Arabic sky to start
Let's
with.
get rid of the moon here for a second.
Yeah, let's do, yeah, the sky viewing options. You go to Star Lore there. Up at the top, you want Arabic indigenous. Will do. Okay. Now, what I need you to do is basically come up a little bit. Pleiades is right at the top. I want Pleiades to be a little closer to the center, just a little more. You might have to zoom out a bit. Now, one of the things that happens in ancient Arabic skies, we're used to primarily looking at figures, animals, whatever in our sky in Western astronomy from the side, in profile. Now, what you see here, can you bring it down just a little bit further? Yeah, there you go, perfect. So what you're looking at now, there's the Pleiades in the middle of that long curve. There you go. What you're looking at here is something from the top. This is called Al-Thuraya. Thuraya is a very, very old name. They're not really entirely sure of the meaning. It's so old, but it is a female term. It is a term of endearment. It probably means a little abundant one. And you're looking at the top of her head. The Pleiades is her hair. And she has two arms reaching out across the sky. And the one that goes up where it says the elbow there, that is the beautiful arm. And the double cluster is a tattoo on her wrist, and her hand, which is in the W of Cassiopeia, is the henna hand, which is a hand that's decorated with henna. It's like a tattoo. And that is on one side. The hand that goes down the other side is the scabrous arm. This is, and you'll notice that the arm up top is completely surrounded by star clusters, by nebula, by all kinds of stuff. The other arm is in the piece of sky where there's almost nothing really. And it's all about balancing light and dark and good and evil and abundance and famine. And it's a balancing figure, and it's a really, really major one. Now, if we slide her back up again and go down so we can see Orion, you'll see the Hyades there. That is the modern official name for the star, Aldebaran. Alpha Tauri, but you'll see there is a corral, is what it is, which has got Aldebaran, who is the shepherd. He's got two dogs and he's got some camels in there. And Aldebaran means the follower. Who is he following? Al-Thariah. And down below, you see Al-Jawza. Now, Al-Jawza is a giant figure. And in many parts of the world where they do describe it as a figure, it is described as male, but Al-Jawza is a female giant. And the 3 stars that are the belt is a string of pearls or jewels.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a different way of viewing the sky from what we're used to typically when we're looking at our modern IAU sky. And there's all kinds of other interesting things in the sky, but I invite you to try Stellarium and explore it for yourself. If we look at a more modern sky, or we look at an Arabic sky that is like Bedouin, they still have Al-Thariah, they still have Al-Jawza, but everything is kind of shrunk. Not necessarily because there is less there, but because we don't know as much as we used to. Yeah, that's the modern Arabic version right there. And this relates to, I mentioned him a moment ago, Abdel Rahman al-Sufi, who 936 described the coat hanger. He also is the astronomer who is well known for translating Ptolemy's works into Arabic, and then it got translated from Arabic into English, and that's how we recovered Ptolemy's works, basically. He was the guy that created the sky, and that's pretty much the way that Ptolemy described it. Ptolemy didn't give names to stars, he described stars. There were 10 stars in his list that had actual names. The rest were, this is the right shoulder, this is the right foot, whatever. And so it was all descriptions, which is good because it makes it much easier to figure out what stars that he was talking about. Why don't we go to Babylonian?
Let's see.
Mulapin, yeah, Mulapin tablets are a whole bunch of cuneiform tablets that record these ancient skies. And you can see that a lot of the stuff that Ptolemy later incorporates into his sky are here. You see they have the bull there in the middle, Alu. And just like Ptolemy, it's only the front half of the bull. There's no back half. It's just the front part. And the star cluster, the Zapu or Sabetu, that is a group of 7 stars. And Shidalu there is a hunter sort of figure you see down there that later becomes Orion. You'll notice just to the left there too, that's Gemini, but it isn't. And Tuamo is the twins, but it's 2 sets of twins. There's a greater set of twins up by Castor and Pollux, and then there's a lesser set of twins next to it. So it's a little bit different, and it evolves. If we go to Babylonian Seleucid, that is 1,000 years later. And what you're looking at here is the descendants of Alexander the Great and their astronomers primarily in Egypt. And you'll see that a lot of the stuff is the same, but some of it has been renamed. You'll notice that the twins has become just twins, not greater or lesser anymore. It's just one set of twins. And that Shadalo figure, who is a god in the original version, is now just this guy with this name in the sky. There are all kinds of examples like that throughout the sky. So you'll also notice that they have come up with a new name for the Pleiades. They call it the bristle. Why don't we do?
Here it is. Yeah.
I have a question before we move on to Babylonian. You said one was from earlier and one was for later. For my brain, where would you place this kind of in time relative to, I guess, all my Western knowledge? I'm used to like ancient Egypt, Greece, Romans. Are they all before then, or?
Well, ancient Egypt, and we'll look at Egypt in just a second. I'll show you. Maybe that's where we'll go next. But basically, this is the original Babylonian Mulapin stuff is going back to some of the origin dates of the Egyptian stuff. That's roughly contemporary. And then when we get to Seleucid that we were just showing you, that is their conquering, like Alexander the Great goes and conquers the greater part of the world there. And his descendants end up in Alexandria. And the Seleucid skies, that's their skies in Egypt. So now the two are starting to get combined a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's really interesting how just the historical context too kind of starts to change the asterisms.
Yeah.
different
Let's
culture.
go to the Egyptian sky for a second because you brought that up. Yeah, Egyptian right there. Okay, now one of the difficulties that we have with Egyptian skies is we're trying to work with hieroglyphics and fragmented records and so on. And in some cases, we have very clear ideas of what's up there, and others not so clear because pieces are missing. There are, like the Ramesside tables, we know a third are for sure, a third are, yeah, we're pretty sure, and a third we haven't figured out yet. So there is more stuff coming. But if we move up a little bit, you'll see that Orion has become a very, very large figure there. It's taken in stars of Eridanus and so on. And the three stars that are the belt in Orion now are three jewels in the Egyptian pharaoh's crown of this figure, Sa, who's got a kilt and he's carrying a staff and he's pointing up to a jaw that is of something that you see all over the world. That jaw, you'll see it in all kinds of cultures. The Hyades is always being called a jaw of one sort of animal or another. And this is no exception. And then you see the Pleiades is a flock. We're not entirely sure what is a flock of birds, some sort. But there's all kinds of interesting things. If we go to the Egyptian Dendera sky, which is the next one down there, now we're looking at that Seleucid period again. And this is about the time that they created the ceiling in the Dendera temple. And now it looks more like Osiris does, or Osiris does today. It's actually Orion, I should say. It is Osiris. And the figure that follows him, which is part of Canis Major in Sirius, is his sister, Isis, who rescues him after he's killed and puts him back together and he's resurrected, and it's all part of this myth. But there's the bull from the Babylonian sky that you see just above him there, and the ram, and you see Shu and Tefnut there, who are twins, but they're a male and female in this particular case. So you can see how the two are starting to come together and form a new sky. Okay, let's go to a Chinese sky for a second. Yeah, that's the one. Now, this is the sky around the 17th century. This is when Europeans started recording stuff, and they started adding to their sky, and there are hundreds of asterisms up there, and there is absolutely everything you can possibly imagine, that everything that's down here is up there. So you'll see that Orion has become this large figure that's related to armed forces called Send Armed Forces. And you'll see that there is that little square down by the foot, which was a footstool. If you were looking at it at the Arabic sky, it's now a jade well. And if you look up at the Hyades cluster, B3 there, that is a net. And if you look up at the Pleiades, that's a hairy head, which kind of resembles that Arabic sky, right? That was the top of Altharia's head originally. But it's a very, very busy sky. There's all kinds of stuff there. Now, if you go to Chinese medieval, which is just down a little bit there, you can see that it's similar, but a little bit different. This is about 1,000 years earlier. Okay. And one of the reasons some of these things has changed is you have precession, and some of the asterisms that they were using were lunar stations where the moon would go through and they would use it as a calendar. They would use it for various purposes. And now those stars have moved because of precession. They had to make some adjustments, and things are a little bit different. You can look at some of these skies and they don't match up anymore. If you go to Korean, for example, right there, it's almost identical. It's a very, very similar sort of thing. There's a lot of communication between the two cultures. But if you go back to some of these earlier skies, there's a very famous map engraved on stone that's about 1300s. you can't match up the stars with the modern sky anymore because the stars move, of course. They all have their proper relative motions and precession. So if you are hoping to see the exact same sky that your very ancient ancestors were looking at when you go out and look at the sky at night, that can't happen because the stars have moved. The tilt of the Earth and its wobble has moved things around. Let's go back up the list a little ways. Let's up a little higher. You've got Burab.
As we're looking around, I've seen already some people see some objects and they have names for their own that they know in their own culture. Feel free to put them in either the YouTube chat or the regular chat. We'd love to know what you see in your sky.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Love to hear from you. Now this is a Australian sky from the Burab people, and you're looking again at Orion there. And what you got there is two boys. There you'll see one has basically the three stars of the belt are his shoulders and his throat. And then the sword is another boy there. And you'll see Gellerlech there is the Hyades cluster, and that translates as pink cockatoo. But you see, it's not a cockatoo. That's his name. He is a dancer. He's playing a didgeridoo. And he's playing it for Lamenkirk, which is a group of dancing girls. You see there's a kangaroo up there. You see there's all kinds of animals in the sky as well. But, you know, a different perspective is giving you a different view of Orion entirely and things around it. Go to Belarusian, because I see that's right up above you there. So now, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, they tend to think, well, okay, we're talking about European skies and, you know, they adopted Ptolemy, didn't they? Officially, maybe, yeah. But if you, to this day, go into any part of Europe, go into the backcountry and start talking to people about their skies and the way they use them traditionally for agriculture or whatever it was, they had their own skies up there. And so you see, you've got Orion has become a throne. And then you've got the three stars in the belt are reapers or mowers, and the sword is a rake for raking up all the grain they just cut down. So you see things are changing. You'll find very, very often, or you see the twins actually represent a couple of countries, were actually two kingdoms that were related at one time, Poland and Lithuania. And you can see that the Pleiades there have become this is a really, really common theme throughout Eastern Europe, a hen and chicks. It's very, very, very common. Let's go up a little bit further again on the list, up to the top there, and let's do Aztec. So now, this is an ancient Aztec sky, and you'll see that Gemini has become a ball court for one of the very popular games that they played back then. But you'll see that the belt and the sword of Orion have become two sticks, and every 52 years they had this ceremony where they relit the fire by rubbing two sticks together, and this represents that ceremony. You'll also notice that the Pleiades, they don't really have anything that we're aware of at the current time for the Hyades. They might have, it could be that it was lost. But the Pleiades is a marketplace. They saw it as a circle of goods, and the star in the middle is the merchant waiting to sell that stuff. Let's go up to Anatan at the top there. Anatan, we're now in the South Pacific. And you basically got the Hyades has become a pair of tongs. That's another very, very common theme throughout the world. Don't have a name for the Pleiades that we're aware of, although I suspect that they probably had something similar because all of Polynesian cultures, except this one, seem to have a name for that. But we'll get to that in a minute. And the belt of Orion has become a yoke. And that's another very common theme. Let's go down the list a little ways. Let's do Hawaiian. Okay, now let's zoom out a bit because this is a big asterism. You see there, that is the top end of the Baylor of Makalei. And the tail and the handle of the dipper is going right off the bottom. Just leave it there for a sec. There is the kite of Coelho. You see it up on the upper right there that we mentioned earlier. There's the frigate bird, which is Cassiopeia. And Nahiku, the seven, that is the Big Dipper over there. That's another one of the star lines. But this is one of their major star lines that they use for doing their navigation. But next to it, you see that Orion has got a name, and that translates as cat's cradle. And that is a new name. I was telling you earlier that they had lost names for some of these things, and they had to come up with new ones. A very popular game for children in their part of the world is that game with the strings in your fingers, where you create these cat's cradle things. That's their modern name for it. Okay, let's go down to Inuit. Now, one of the things that you run into if you're this far north is you only got night skies to look at in the winter. In the summer, the sun doesn't set. But here you see you've got another completely different view of the sky. You've got a caribou over there for the Big Dipper over on the side there. But if we zoom in just a little bit, and maybe go up just a little. I was talking about flickering earlier. That's that bright star just above right there. That's it. That's Sirius. But then the three stars of the belt, that is the runners. And the Hyades cluster is the dogs. And they're chasing their game up there, which is Pleiades. And the stars that start over there with Castor and Pollux and Gemini, and then go down to Canis Minor, that is the collarbones. So it's all stuff that's related to their culture up in the sky there. Let's look at Japanese moon stations for a second, because you'll notice you were looking earlier at Chinese and at Korean skies. And one of the things about Japanese skies is they don't have all of those many asterisms like they do in the neighboring Asian countries. These are primarily lunar stations. I was talking about those a moment ago that you use to track the moon across the sky. You can see that Orion has become the investigator, which is part of that. And you can see how they've got them scattered across the sky. Now it's a little bit off now because these are ancient skies, and again, with your precession, they don't line up the way they used to. You can see Subaru is their name for the Pleiades, and everybody is familiar with that particular brand of car. That's what it's named for, is the Pleiades. Bashi means lunar station for stars. Now we go to Camillera, which is the next one on the list, just below there. We're going back to Australia. Let's zoom in just a little bit. There are variations on this depending on the Australian culture you're talking about, but basically the Pleiades are a group of 7 young women. Okay, now throughout the world, the Pleiades is a group of stars that appears more often than anything else. Basically, it's the number 1 on the hit chart for asterisms. And very often it's represented as females, not always, but in this case it is. These are young, uninitiated women. You go to the Hyades there, and it's called Old Filler and the Gunya. Gunya is his hut. That's what that triangular shape of the Hyades represents. And the star Aldebaran is an old wise man, an old filler. And he's there to guard those young women from the young boys, the Vire, which is Orion down there. Because they can't They can't go anywhere near them. They're not initiated either. We go down to the Khoikhoi, the next one on the list. We're now looking at African skies. And I told you this story earlier. I was showing you there is Aldebaran and the Pleiades. You've got the great hunter or the sky god, and you've got the wives who are the Pleiades, and he goes hunting for 3 zebras, but in some cultures it's other animals. There's 3 of them. Shoots the arrow, it falls short. That's the sword of Orion, and the lion is waiting in ambush to see if he can catch either a zebra or the hunter. They're foolish enough to get too close. Let's look at Lacono. So Quacoya there is a crab, a blue crab. And again, you've got a the Hyades in these cultures are either a jaw, like I was saying earlier, or it's tweezers that are used to pick up hot things out of the fire. And very often the Pleiades is represented as a grill for cooking, or as a young group of people. If we go to Macedonian, there we go. Now, this is something you find if you go into various parts of Europe and you go into agricultural communities. Orion isn't the hunter, he's a plowman. And you see the upper part there, there's the plowman. You see the 3 stars, those are the oxen. And actually, in this particular culture, that bottom part of Orion there, down around the stars Rigel and Saiph, is called Libra, the scales, which is nowhere near our constellation Libra. Up where the Hyades are, you've got a pig and you've got, livestock. And then the Pleiades, and this, as I said earlier, is a very, very common repeating theme throughout Eastern and Northern Europe, is a hen and chicks. And over to one side there, that figured off to the left of the Hyades, that's a fox that's waiting to try and get them. Let's go to Mari. Now, I mentioned earlier that they are great navigators and that they use the sky for traveling across thousands of miles of open ocean, but this is a particularly representative asterism here because this is Tanui. Tanui is a great ancestor. And the Pleiades is the foam at the front of his voyaging canoe. And the Hyades is his triangular sail. And the 3 stars of the belt, Tautaro, those are the glittering waters going off the back of his boat. Let's go to, we've got a whole bunch of Maori stuff in there. Let's go down a little lower though, to Maya. So now you're getting into some very ancient skies here, and basically what you've got here, down where the belt of Orion is, you've got a turtle, and you've got the primordial fire. And actually, if we slide this up a little bit, you'll see there's a very long line that runs along the Milky Way, which is the paddler gods. And what these paddler gods are doing is they're paddling a group of gods to that primordial fire. And then up, yeah, there you go. There they are paddling. Perfect. All right, so we'll go back. So, again, you don't see anything that we're aware of that they used back then that was related to the Pleiades, although in Mayan and Aztec culture, we know for sure that they had temples that were aligned to the Pleiades and they used them for all kinds of features, but it isn't represented specifically as an asterism here. So let's move on to Mongolian. And look, there's nothing there. Don't get the idea that there isn't anything in that culture. This is one of the things we struggle with. Lots of stuff has been lost. And there's probably stuff that we haven't discovered yet. So we're working on this, but I just sort of wanted to throw it in there, indicate there are some places in the sky that you may find when you're searching through these sky cultures that would give you the impression they didn't really have much going on in the sky. Not necessarily true in this case. Pretty sure it's not. We go to Navajo next. Now you have another figure here that's crossing the sky. This is the first slim one. You see he has a belt just like Orion. You see he's got this staff there. And he is heading towards Dil Yehe. Dil Yehe means pin-like sparkles. And this is the Pleiades. That's a very, very important asterism in their culture because it indicated the beginning of the planting and sowing season. And they had a saying that that you couldn't let Dil Yehe see your seeds because it was a bunch of young boys that were going to steal them. It was an indication that you had to get it into the ground before this rose in the sky. And that would be, or the rising and setting that is between the 31st of October and the 30th of April, basically, is when they're in the sky. So when they set in April, that's when you start planting your seeds. Let's go to Norse. Now, this is another culture we know for sure that they were great navigators. They went all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. We know that they used the stars. We know more modern versions of what they used, but this was basically most of it erased by colonial powers, and it's been really a challenge trying to recover bits and pieces from the fragments that are left. But we do know that the three stars of the belt of Orion are the fishermen. We do know that the Hyades cluster is the wolf's mouth. And the reason he's right there is because one of the things he's supposed to do, there's two wolves actually in Norse mythology. They're trying to swallow the sun and the moon. And the moon is going to go right past the Hyades pretty regularly. Also, they have the Asar battlefield. That's Auriga there. And that's where Ragnarok, the final battle, is going to happen. Again, we know there's probably other pieces that we haven't recovered yet, but we're working on that. Let's go to the Northern Andes. Now you see, here's another sky where we have things up there. We have a jaguar right there, but there's Orion, and there's the Hyades, and there's the Pleiades, and everybody sees them. Like Orion is 7 of the 21 brightest stars in the sky, and we don't have anything that we know of yet. But we're working on it. But if we go to Ojibwe, these people have been working pretty hard on their skies, and you can see that Orion has become a much larger figure with arms that stretch out to embrace the sky. He's the winter maker, and he's looking at Begoni Gizig, which is the Pleiades, and that is a hole in the sky. They've got a really, they've recovered a lot of their sky. It's quite an interesting one. We go Polynesian there. Again, I guess they're using Hawaiian, basically. There's the Baylor. We were looking for the Baylor earlier. It was kind of off the end of the screen, but now that we moved it, you can see it a little bit easier. Let's do Romanian. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that is overlapping basically, but again, the Pleiades is a hen and chicks. Again, you've got all kinds of interesting things in the sky. You can see that there's an axe up there. You can see all kinds of creatures. This is, again, out in the rural parts. There's a whole, if we zoom in on Orion there's a whole lot of overlapping things there, basically. Basically, they've got the three Marias, the three saints there. You've got, oops, we're going to time out here for a sec. You've got a bicycle there, and you've got a Cid. And it depends on what part of the culture you are going to, what name they're going to use, and they probably use several, but there are some, in some cases you have within the same area. And I was talking about this earlier, people who are looking at the same thing and seeing something quite different 10 miles down the road. So nothing unusual in that. Let's take a look at the Russian sky for a sec. And we'll have to zoom out a little bit. So basically, what they have up there is a nest, and it could be a duck's nest or a goose nest, or there are various, depending on the region you're going to, there are various different things. And again, the Orion is going to be something related to reaping or bringing in crops and so on. Let's go down the list a little further. Let's do Sami. This is Northern European skies. So here they don't have anything for the Hyades, but the 3 stars of the belt of Orion are Galla's suns, and Galla appears elsewhere in the sky. You see him way over on the left there, Poseidon. There's the ski runners. These are all hunters, and if we zoom up a bit, you see what they're all hunting with their pack of dogs, which is Pleiades, is Sarva the elk. You can see the antlers are Cassiopeia, the W of Cassiopeia there. Actually, if we can zoom around and take a look at the Big Dipper, you'll see, there you go. You'll see the hunter Fabna, and he's got a bow and arrow, and he's trying to shoot that elk, but he has to be absolutely sure that he gets that shot right, because if he misses and hits the sky support, that's Polaris. The sky falls down. But there's all kinds of interesting stories related to those people. Let's go to Samoan. We'll need to slide back over to there. So in their sky, the Hyades has been made just a little bit bigger, but it's another one of those sets of tongs or tweezers for picking things up. That triangular asterism just to the left is a torch. And the stars of the belt of Orion, that is a carrying yoke. They'll have this thing across their shoulders and they're carrying, bags or baskets and things. So again, you're looking at this from different parts of the world. You can see how they don't necessarily view it as a figure, but as something more utilitarian. Let's go to Sardinian. So again, you got the 3 Marias. That is the 3 stars of Orion. The Hyades is a bunch. Oh, sorry, the bunch is driver, pardon me, and the Pleiades is a bunch that they're driving, a bunch of animals. It's a little bit more agricultural in perspective. Let's go to Siberian. And very similar to Russian, you've got the nest up there, and you've got the reaper. Let's go to Tonga. So the Hyades has become a pigeon perch. Or sorry, that's tweezers. Pardon me, that's tweezers, and the 3 stars of the belt of Orion are the pigeon perch. So you've got things that are related to their culture, and not necessarily like some of them, like tongs are related to other parts of Oceania, but they have their own take on some of these things. Tucano is the next one. I like this one. This is an interesting view. Now Orion's become an adze for chopping things. And again, you got the tweezers for the Hyades, and you've got a grill for cooking fish, and you've got an animal up there that they would be hunting for cooking. Tupiguani. This one's fun because if we zoom in a bit on Orion there, and that particular thing, you can see this is like the ancient Egyptians. They've made it a much larger figure and they've oriented it differently. So what we would consider to be the belt of Orion is actually a cast on his injured leg, and he's walking with a stick, and the Hyades have become his head, And the Pleiades is a feather in his cap. Quite interesting. Let's go to Vanuatu, back in the Pacific. And here you've got another one of those variations on carrying yolks. In fact, you've got two. The three stars in the bill are a shorter yolk, and the rest of it is a longer yolk for carrying a basket with produce in it. You've got those tweezers again. And here, interestingly, depending on what part of Vanuatu you're in, those 7 stars are the young boys of Lapnaman. Lapnaman is a settlement there, or the young girls. So it depends on what part of Vanuatu you're in. And that basically has taken us through all of the skies that they've got in there, I think. So maybe what we should do is have a discussion and see if anyone has any questions. Were there any questions in the?
Yeah, so we have a couple questions. One person joined a little late, but they're wondering, have you noticed if there's a lot of connection between Sirius and the stars in Orion in the cultures you examine?
Well, Sirius is a very, very, very bright star, and it appears in cultures all over the world. There you go with an Arabic sky, but it is very, very common now. It isn't necessarily related to a dog. It is if you're tracing a line out of ancient Babylonian skies and taking it forward, but you see it as a lot of things. But yeah, I mean, being one of the brightest stars in the sky. But like, for example, you saw it in the Hindu culture where it was standalone. It was a star all by itself called flickering, which was very important to them for, for predicting the weather and so on. You don't necessarily get a stick figure in all cultures. So in some cases, they're single stars.
Thank you.
So-
So I have just a comment that I was thinking of is I wonder with how we have so much light pollution now, if we go by way in the future, when people look at what we saw in the stars, if that's going to actually affect the asterisms that
Yeah,
are coming to
if
us.
you go to Babylonian, Malapan sky for a sec. Here we go. And if there's a figure on there on a Nitu, you're going to have to swivel around here. It's where Andromeda is.
Oops. Let's see. Go this way. Here we go.
There she is, right in the middle there. You zoom in on Anu-Nitu for a second. We're talking. This is a goddess. Okay, now, actually, take the artwork out just for a sec. There you see the asterism, and you see that her head is the Andromeda Galaxy. And if you have a dark sky, that's immediately apparent because that's a huge object in the sky. If you have a dark sky, you can see it with the naked eye, and it's obvious that that would be your head. But if you were in a orbital 3 or a much poorer sky, then it wouldn't necessarily make sense anymore because you'd probably see the bright stars, but you wouldn't see the Andromeda Galaxy, which is her head. I mean, another example that we can use, if we go to the Beehive cluster, Messier 44, and we go to Chinese skies.
Let's see. Let's go to let me do this way. Go this way first.
Do a little bit of search stuff here. People can see how we're gonna.
I also find it amazing. I think
Middle
our
of Cancer.
constellations
There we
are
go, there we
large.
Okay,
Yep.
now go to Chinese. So what you're looking at here, okay, is a mausoleum, and the stars in the middle are the corpses. And if you go to a Korean sky, it's pretty much the same sort of thing. And they saw these stars. The ancient Greek skies, they saw this cluster as, if you go, Greek Almagest will do. Okay, it's Cancer, but what that is in the middle there is referred to by Ptolemy Aratus as the manger. So you know that they saw it in their ancient skies, but nowadays people in light polluted skies are typically referring to stuff like that. Like I mentioned Brocchi's cluster earlier, as telescopic asterisms, because that is what they are used to having to use to see them. But it's amazing how many I discovered through the assembly of all of these asterisms in this project, how many of these things that were telescopic originally were not. People could see them quite clearly, So that's a very good point,
So
That's,
I've studied, for a good while before the pandemic, I studied Chinese
mhm.
language, Mandarin. And whenever I had to do a project, for class project, I would always do it on astronomy. So one of the neat things that I learned about the astronomy, the Chinese astronomy, if I can go north, is Polaris is actually the realm of the celestial palace where the emperor goes
Yes.
when he
The
dies.
Chinese sky is all divided into enclosures, and this is
Yeah.
one of them. And then in the enclosure, you find all the things that will be related to that specific enclosure. Yes, there you go, the
That's right.
translation. So you see everything in there is royal. You've got the emperor, you've got the royal secretary, the celestial bed. Yeah.
And then the farther you go from the pole, the you go down in castes. You get into the merchants, and you get the
Yeah.
peasants, and you go farther and farther and farther.
One of the things you find in the Chinese medieval sky, we're talking about like Ming Dynasty, Ming Three Kingdom stuff, is that when you look at these asterisms, each of the stars has a rank. So you'll go in there and this is the empress, this is the first consort, this is the lady in waiting. I mean, they all are ranked. If you go into this particular sky, they seem to have abandoned that, and basically the names of the stars are the name of the asterism and a number. It's like star number 3 in this particular. So they've come up with a different system, even though a lot of the figures do still relate to the earlier sky. But so you have a lot more names for stars in the older Chinese skies than you do in the more modern ones, it seems. And they take it down to I mean, when I say everything is up there, quite literally, there is everything up there. They have a toilet up there and a screen. Can you find that? You can search for it under their if you go to the search function under constellations in the Chinese sky. So
Can I do it?
yeah, search there. Go to lists. Go to constellations. A little bit more. There you go. Go down to toilet. There it is. Now zoom in. You've got a toilet, you've got a screen, and actually it's not showing in your version here, but there are 3. Actually move it a little bit to the left. Oh, other way. There's a group of stars in there. In my version, oh, there they are, down below. Move up. Grandfather, grandson, and son, and they're all standing next to the toilet, and that star there is excrement. It's sort of like a toilet training video here. I mean, you've got everything that happens in the world is happening in the sky. It's quite remarkable how everything is up there. So
Yeah. And there's Orion, by the way, so everybody knows where we are.
there is, yeah, the Sandarm forces, the suppressed vassal. There's the Jade Well I mentioned. Yeah.
So we have another question actually about the latest Sky News article. You mentioned the Zooniverse website. Can you elaborate how this website works?
Okay, Zooniverse basically started with the Sloan Digital Sky Survey back in 2007 when they were trying to get pictures of as many galaxies as they possibly could, and they succeeded well beyond their expectations and utterly appalled with the number that they had. And they realized that if their team spent the rest of their lives analyzing these things, they would die before they got through them all. what are we going to do? And what happened was one of them said, what would happen if we put them all on a website? You know, the pictures and some simple instructions. Do you think anyone would show up? Yeah, hundreds of thousands of people signed up for free, went through, helped them classify these things. They're now on the 6th generation of this. It's called Galaxy Zoo. And all kinds of other astronomers and people from other disciplines in science figured out, you know, I could use that too. And so now they have an umbrella site, which is called Zooniverse. And if you go there, like I said, you'll find stuff from various different scientific disciplines, but a lot of it, you can see them right there, a lot of it is astronomical, and Galaxy Zoo still in there. Some of it is helping them go through ancient records or ancient photographic plates from the early days of astrophotography to help them discover stuff that they missed because they didn't know what they were looking for back then. So, you know, you can do cloud spotting on Mars. You can help the witch hunters there is helping the people at LIGO look for gravitational waves. There are several sites like Planet Hunters NGTS that you help them locate exoplanets. All kinds, you're helping looking for dark energy. Astronomy Rewind is one of those sites where you're looking at old records and helping them find stuff. There's Galaxy Zoo down there. All kinds of stuff with variable stars. There's Planet Hunters Test, which is a test satellite. So yeah, it's free, easy to use. There's a little instructional video for each one of these things. Your name goes in the list of all the people that are recorded is helping the researchers. And if you're doing Galaxy Zoo and you see a picture of a galaxy and you like it, you can put it in your album and keep it. So that's what Zooniverse is all about.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions. One's just, we talked about different brightness of skies. If you can see more stars, for those of you who actually have been into a Bortle 1 sky, do you find it harder to pick out these shapes in the sky?
What we're talking about for most of these is stars that are visible to the unaided eye. A lot of these ancient skies, they didn't have telescopes. They had astronomical instruments for measuring angles and so on, but they didn't have anything with lenses that they could magnify and they could gather more light. So it was a lot of these asterisms, of the vast majority, like I said, only 506 out of 10,118 are telescopic, which means you would have to have a telescope to see these well. They're mostly the sort of thing that you would see with the unaided eye, certainly with binoculars in the dark sky. So of course, I mean, I've for years had people come to me saying, I bought this telescope and it's been sitting in my garage for 15 years because the first time they took it out and looked up at the sky, when they set it up, they screamed because they're looking at 4,000 stars, right? If you are getting into this and you're learning how to do this, go out at sunset and watch those stars appear, and the patterns are going to be immediately obvious before it gets fully dark, because those are going to be the first and second magnitude stars. You'll see them, and then once all the other stars come out, you'll still see them, because once you see the pattern, you'll get it. So
yeah, if you look at the Pleiades with binoculars, when at twilight they look like 7 sisters, but
yeah,
when it's fully dark, it gets more confusing because there are more stars.
Does, and that's part of the reason in many cultures it's called 7 sisters or 7 brothers, or sometimes 6. It depends on where they're viewing from, at what time. So
I can agree what you were saying about once you kind of see the shapes, they're there. After our episode all about deep dive into Leo, I went out and I'm like, I see Leo now. I've never been able to identify it before, but now I see it. One kind of tangential question, when you're talking about precession and how the sky changes over time, a common one that people always talk about is our zodiac signs aren't the same because they're from Babylonian signs. Is that true? Is that hold some weight?
I mean, there are different ages that where the ecliptic moves along, and you have different constellations that line up with those things. Specifically, though, what I was talking about is if you're talking about some of these ancient Chinese guys, for example, the pole star wasn't Polaris. There was the Earth is tilted on its axis and it spins around like this, and it describes a circle through the sky. And it takes thousands of years, but at one time, if we go back thousands of years, the pole star was, for example, Thuban, Alpha Draconis. And so, if you're talking about back in Ptolemy's time, they were very often using the Little Dipper as an indicator of north. But at that time, Polaris wasn't the pole star. They knew it was up there in the north and it never set and you could use it for north. But it wasn't until years later that it, lined up that way. One of the reasons you don't see something like that in the southern sky is it really isn't a polar southern star. It's a kind of an empty piece of sky there. So they tend to use the Southern Cross, the constellation Crux, and the pointer stars to indicate north and
You've
south.
just inspired me. I've never actually thought to put up the pole precession circle for the southern sky. I'll have to do that.
You should do that. You should do that for the northern sky. I mean, in the handbook, it gives you the list of the stars that circle goes through, so you can figure it out for yourself. But that's specifically what I'm talking about. The same thing will happen with the lunar stations. The moon, the path of the moon through the sky is that those stars change in orientation because of tilt of the Earth. They don't necessarily match up anymore. So you'll notice if you look at really early Vedic, that is Indian skies, they'll have certain things identified as lunar stations, and then later on they get altered a little bit. Same thing with a lot of different cultures, because the path is changed because the tilts moved everything.
There you are. Can you see it?
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, not sure who's oh, let me put the names. I put the stars back. There we go. So Achernar would have been.
Yeah, Achernar, Neoplacidus is in there, Aspidus down there right next to the horizon, southwest.
Let me just find, I'll just go a little further south here. There we go. Further north, let's go. Should be able to go down.
Tip of South America, maybe. You can just click on the end of South America there, it'll take you there. That little arrow will move.
Let's do that. There we go. And
oh, there you go.
Here we are.
Yeah. So there's the precession circle with the dates. You can see how in the southern sky it moves around. Same thing's happening in the northern sky, and that's going to make everything move around. So if you're just looking at asterisms, they're going to be the same asterism. But if you're looking at them for a specific purpose, because you're trying to figure out what time of night is it, because of the moon, or what season, or whatever, and you're navigating, these become important to keep in mind, because and this is something that ethnoastronomers are doing on a regular basis, is running stellarium back thousands of years to figure out what stars were in the sky, because we work hand in hand with archaeoastronomers and we're trying to figure out it's really easy to come up with alignments with any kind of structure on the Earth. There's enough stars that's easy to do, but are any of those valid? We go to the culture and figure out what we know they were looking at, and we look for those alignments, and that's when we need to run the sky back and figure out where the stars are to see if they still match up. That's what that's all about.
And you just answered a question that we had in the Q&A about how well does stellarium accommodate this alterations in time, and the fact that you're using it to go back.
You can run it back thousands of years to do those alignments. They do it on a regular basis. Yes.
Well, it sounds like we're going to have you back at a different time of the year. And
Yeah.
I don't know how you hold all this knowledge in your head. You
Hey,
just had this
you
on the
challenged
top.
me today. You didn't. Typically when I'm working with stellarium, I've got it in translate to English mode, but you went and had it all in the original languages. But fortunately, I've been doing this long enough. I know what I'm looking at, so no problem.
Thank you so much, Charles, for this presentation.
You,
I already kind of knew about the World Asterisms Project from working with you over the past year, but I just learned so much more today. So it was great. super glad
Well,
to hear
thanks for
about it.
letting me do it this way. I haven't tried doing the tour with the live stellarium before, and I think it gave everybody a chance to see how it works, and hopefully people will go out and try it for themselves. 'Cause it's
Mhm.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hopefully you look at the sky completely differently now.
yeah.
Very good. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We're going to start into our deep sky objects. I think next time up is our NGC/IC catalog talk, and we'll probably start, I think we're going to start our next observing program. So that'll be fun. Yeah.
We'll get to the website to see which one we're going to be doing. See you
All right.
all.
Thanks again, Charles.
Okay.
And everybody
You're
keep
welcome.
looking
Thanks
up.
for having me.
Bye.